Word episode. Description refers to a distinct part or segment of a series, like a television show or a sequence of events. It signifies a particular occurrence within a larger, ongoing narrative or process, marking a specific chapter or installment. Phrases of example. First, each episode of his life seemed to be an exercise in self. Second, this whole affair was nothing but a curious episode in my life. Third, the second episode brought about even greater challenges. Word waiter. Description: a person who serves food and drinks to customers in a restaurant. It's someone who takes your order and brings your meal to your table. This is a common job in the food service industry. Phrases of example. First, he beckoned the waiter, and the waiter hurried to serve him. Second, the waiter brought the drinks, and the conversation flowed easily. Third, a young waiter, eager to please, approached our table. Word rental. Description denotes something hired temporarily for a fee, like a car or apartment. It implies a contractual agreement for a limited period, distinguishing it from ownership. It's often used in contexts of property or equipment usage. Phrases of example. First, the rental agreement stipulated a clause regarding early termination penalties. Second, the remote rental property offered an escape from the city's frenetic pace. Third, their precarious financial situation hinged on the ongoing rental income. Word rice. Description: a type of grain often eaten as a staple food. It's a common food around the world and comes in many varieties. It's usually cooked and served as part of a meal. Phrases of example. First, they ate rice with fish and vegetables. Second, the smell of rice and spices filled the air. Third, he wanted only rice and water. Word excessive. Description means more than is necessary, normal, or reasonable. It describes something that is over the limit or beyond what is acceptable, often implying a negative consequence or wastefulness. Phrases of example. First, his excessive confidence bordered on arrogance. Second, the excessive heat made it difficult to breathe. Third, an excessive amount of ambition can be dangerous. Word pretty. Description means attractive or pleasing to the eye. It can also mean quite or rather, used to soften a statement. It describes something visually appealing or indicates a moderate degree of something. Phrases of example. First, she was a pretty girl, lively and agreeable. Second, the little house was pretty, but it was also lonely. Third, he found her pretty, and her voice was pleasant. Word persistent. Description means continuing firmly or stubbornly in a course of action despite difficulty or opposition. It describes someone or something that doesn't give up easily and shows determination or tenacity. It implies a refusal to be deterred. Phrases of example. First, her persistent questioning eroded his confidence in his own narrative. Second, he was a persistent soul, unwilling to accept defeat without a fight. Third, a persistent rumor began to circulate about a secret meeting. Word fall. Description: to move from a standing position to the ground. It can also mean to decrease in amount or to happen or occur. It describes a physical action of dropping or a figurative decline. Phrases of example. First, she felt a sudden fall, and the world spun around her. Second, the leaves would fall, and the ground would be covered in gold. Third, he watched the rain fall on the window, lost in thought. Word allocate. Description: to officially assign something, like resources or funds, to a specific purpose or person. It implies a deliberate distribution, often involving careful planning and prioritization. It suggests a formal process of assigning or distributing. Phrases of example. First, I am a man who must allocate his time wisely, for he has so little of it. Second, we must allocate our resources with a kind of terrible precision, for we have so few. Third, the world is a place where we must allocate our love carefully, for there is not enough to go around. Word agreement. Description denotes a state of having the same opinion or feeling about something. It can also mean a formal arrangement or contract between people or groups, outlining shared commitments or understandings. It signifies harmony or a binding accord. Phrases of example. First, there can be no great accomplishment without an agreement on a common purpose. Second, she felt a kind of silent agreement, an understanding between them that needed no words. Third, the world is not a place for agreement. It is a place for struggle. Word distinct. Description means clearly different and recognizable. It emphasizes a clear difference between two or more things, highlighting their unique qualities or characteristics. It's used to show something isn't similar or blended with something else. Phrases of example. First, a distinct impression grew on me that I was in a place of immense danger. Second, the painting had a distinct quality that I couldn't quite place. Third, she possessed a distinct lack of empathy for the suffering of others. Word vacation. Description, a period of time when someone stops working to relax and enjoy themselves. It's a time for travel, rest, and spending time away from usual routines, often associated with leisure and recreation. Phrases of example. First, we're going on vacation to the beach this summer. Second, a vacation is a change of scenery, nothing more. Third, I need a vacation, a long one. Word check. Description means to look at something or examine it to see if it is correct or okay. It can also mean to verify information or to put a mark on a box. It's often used when confirming details or marking something as done. Phrases of example. First, he checked his pockets for his keys. Second, please check your email, it's important. Third, I checked the list again, and everything was there. Word whole. Description, a space that is lower than the area around it, often circular or a different shape. It can be in a surface like the ground or a wall. It indicates an opening or cavity that disrupts a solid structure or area. Phrases of example. First, there's a hole in the world like a missing tooth. Second, he fell into a rabbit hole and tumbled down, down, down. Third, there was a hole in her heart where love used to live. Word shift. Description refers to a change or movement from one position or state to another. It can describe a change in direction, responsibility, or belief. It's often used in contexts of work schedules or changes in opinion. Phrases of example. First, the shift had been long, and she was weary to the bone. Second, a subtle shift in his expression betrayed his true feelings. Third, the tectonic shift caused widespread destruction and chaos. Word Monday. Description refers to the first day of the week, following Sunday. It's a specific day in the week and is commonly used when talking about schedules, appointments, or days of the week. Phrases of example. First, Monday morning, I would sit and watch the people go by. Second, it was a Monday, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Third, Monday was always the hardest day to face. Word chronic. Description describes a condition or disease that is long-lasting and recurrent. It signifies that something is persistent, ongoing, and difficult to eliminate. It is often used in medical contexts to indicate a condition that is not acute or temporary. Phrases of example. First, his chronic melancholy settled upon him like a shroud. Second, the condition was chronic, incurable, and the treatment provided little relief. Third, a chronic lack of sleep and constant travel took their toll on his health. Word equation. Description, a mathematical statement that shows the relationship between two or more quantities. It presents an equality between two expressions, often involving variables and constants. It's frequently used in mathematics, physics, and other sciences. Phrases of example. First, the equation of life is simple. Believe in yourself. Second, the solution to the equation is in the details. Third, life is an equation, and we are all trying to solve it. Word, roughly. Description means approximately or in a general way, not precisely. It indicates an estimation or a lack of exactness, used to describe quantities, times, or locations with an imprecise quality. Phrases of example. First, they roughly divided the spoils among themselves. Second, the conversation roughly followed the agenda we'd prepared. Third, he roughly sketched out a plan for the journey. Word, ice. Description, frozen water, typically in solid form. It's what you get when water is cold enough to solidify. It can be found in nature or made artificially. It's often used for drinking or to keep things cool. Phrases of example. First, the ice floe did not care about their despair. Second, the ice melted and the river began to flow. Third, the water was cold like ice. Word, careless. Description describes someone who doesn't take care or pay attention to things. It implies a lack of caution or responsibility, often resulting in mistakes or damage. It can refer to actions, possessions, or behavior. Phrases of example. First, his careless words caused her immense pain. Second, he was careless about the details, but brilliant in concept. Third, careless whispers led to a tragic end. Word, nothing. Description means not anything at all, a complete absence of something. It indicates a lack of quantity or existence. It can refer to a lack of objects, people, or even feelings. Phrases of example. First, nothing is ever really lost, and something is always saved. Second, nothing gold can stay. Third, nothing lasts forever, not even heartache. Word, disastrous. Description describes something extremely bad or damaging, often resulting in significant loss or failure. It suggests a catastrophic outcome, far worse than simply negative, and often implies widespread impact or irreversible consequences. Phrases of example. First, the catastrophic consequences of his actions were disastrous. Second, the expedition's disastrous outcome left the team demoralized. Third, a disastrous mistake resulted in the project's complete failure. Word, destruction. Description denotes the act of completely ruining or demolishing something. It signifies the process of bringing something to an end, often through damage or devastation. It implies a forceful and often irreversible ending to something's existence. Phrases of example. First, the destruction of cities is an easy thing. Second, destruction is a great deal further removed from creation than we are willing to admit. Third, he was a destroyer, a bringer of destruction and despair. Word, drunk. Description describes someone who has consumed a large amount of alcohol and is affected by it. It indicates impairment and altered behavior due to intoxication. It's often used to describe someone's state or condition. Phrases of example. First, he was drunk and staggering, not quite knowing where he was. Second, the soldiers were drunk with power and victory. Third, she found him drunk and asleep in the corner. Word, technique. Description refers to a particular method or skill used to achieve a specific result. It describes a way of doing something, often involving a set of steps or procedures. It's commonly used in fields like art, sports, or cooking. Phrases of example. First, the camera technique was something he felt deeply. Second, he had a technique for getting what he wanted. Third, it's a delicate technique and requires practice. Word, mainstream. Description describes something that is dominant, conventional, and widely accepted by the general public. It signifies being part of the popular culture, trends, or beliefs, often contrasting with something unconventional or alternative. Phrases of example. First, they wanted to be part of the mainstream, to fit in and conform to societal norms. Second, rejecting the mainstream was a way of asserting his individuality and rebellion. Third, she felt alienated from the mainstream, a misfit in a world of conformity. Word, fear. Description, to feel afraid of something or someone. It describes a strong feeling of anxiety, worry, or apprehension about a potential danger or negative outcome. It often involves anticipating something unpleasant or harmful. Phrases of example. First, he feared the darkness and the silence of the night. Second, fear not, for I am with you always. Third, fear is a powerful thing, but courage is stronger. Word, almost. Description means nearly or close to something. It indicates that something didn't quite happen or isn't completely true. Used to show something was very near to happening, but didn't. Phrases of example. First, it was a wonder to me that I was almost a man, and I was not afraid. Second, he was almost a god, but he was just a man. Third, the whole world seemed to be a terrible and beautiful dream, and I was almost awake. Word, village. Description, a small group of houses, usually in the countryside. It's smaller than a town, often with a close-knit community. It describes a rural area where people live and work together. Phrases of example. First, the village was small, and the people were kind. Second, it was a quiet village, far from the troubles of the city. Third, the old village stood silent, steeped in ancient lore. Word, remote. Description, describes a place or thing that is far away from populated areas or other places. It indicates distance, isolation, or a lack of connection. It can also refer to something that is unlikely or infrequent. Phrases of example. First, the cabin was remote, far from any signs of civilization. Second, a remote village nestled amongst the mountains. Third, the island felt remote and untouched. Word, deployment. Description, refers to the act of arranging forces or resources for a specific purpose. It often describes military actions or the strategic placement of personnel or equipment. It also applies to the launch or introduction of a new system or product. Phrases of example. First, the deployment to Iraq involved complex logistical challenges. Second, the deployment of troops would be a strategic blunder. Third, she questioned the deployment of resources for the project. Word, reproduce. Description, means to create a copy or duplicate of something, often referring to biological reproduction, like plants or animals, or the creation of art music. It signifies the process of generating something similar to an original, whether naturally or artificially. Phrases of example. First, the species must reproduce, and to reproduce, it must endure. Second, it's the impulse to reproduce to create that compels us. Third, nature abhors a vacuum. It reproduces itself in the void. Word, jam. Description, a situation where something is blocked or crowded. It can refer to traffic, a physical blockage, or even a difficult situation. It describes a state of congestion or being stuck. Phrases of example. First, the traffic jam was so long, it seemed endless. Second, a jam of feelings and thoughts crowded her head. Third, the radio was stuck on a jam of the same old songs. Word, process. Description, refers to a series of actions or steps taken to achieve a particular end. It describes how something is done, made, or happens. Often used when explaining how things work or are completed, often in a sequence. Phrases of example. First, the process of growing up is the process of learning to say goodbye. Second, the learning process is essential for growth. Third, the whole process of making art is about changing. Word, unity. Description denotes the state of being joined together or forming a whole. It describes a sense of togetherness, agreement, or shared purpose among people or things. It highlights harmony, collaboration, and a lack of division. Phrases of example. First, they stood together, a symbol of unity against the encroaching darkness. Second, the strength of a nation lies in the unity of its people. Third, unity is power, division is weakness. Word, local. Description, relates to a specific area or community, often smaller than a region or state. It describes things that are characteristic of or originate from a particular place. It is used when discussing people, businesses, or events within a defined geographic area. Phrases of example. First, the local pub was our sanctuary, a place of familiar faces and easy laughter. Second, he knew the local customs better than I did, a keen observer of the town's rhythm. Third, she felt a connection to the local wildlife, a deep sense of belonging in the wilderness. Word, develop. Description, means to grow or cause something to grow, either physically or in terms of skills or ideas. It can also mean to create or invent something new. It signifies a process of progress or evolution over time. Phrases of example. First, he will develop a talent for the thing he's most afraid of. Second, they develop the skill to not be noticed. Third, the human spirit develops slowly, then suddenly. Word, appealing. Description, describes something attractive or tempting, often in a complex or subtle way. It suggests a quality that draws interest or desire, going beyond simple pleasantness. It implies something has a compelling or captivating characteristic. Phrases of example. First, he had an appealing honesty, a simplicity of soul that was very rare. Second, there was something appealing about his vulnerability, something that drew her to him. Third, he found the idea of a simple life, a life without all the pretense, very appealing. Word, strategy. Description, a plan or method designed to achieve a goal. It's about figuring out how to do something effectively. Strategies can be used in many situations, from games to business to learning something new. Phrases of example. First, a clever strategy is worth more than brute force. Second, our strategy was simple, survive. Third, the best strategy is to be completely honest. Word, this. Description, this indicates something nearby or previously mentioned. It can refer to a specific thing, person, or situation. It is commonly used to point out or refer to something concrete or abstract that has been introduced. Phrases of example. First, this is the end of the road. Second, this is what I have to do. Third, this is not a story to pass on. Word, used to. Description, expresses past habits or repeated actions. It describes something you did regularly in the past, but no longer do. It shows a routine or custom that existed before and has now stopped. Phrases of example. First, I used to think I knew everything, but I was wrong. Second, we used to laugh at the sound of the rain. Third, I used to be afraid, but now I'm not. Word, steam. Description, refers to the visible vapor created when water is heated and turns into gas. It can also describe a forceful, continuous flow or a strong emotion. It often implies a sense of pressure or intensity, whether physical or figurative. Phrases of example. First, the steam rose from the freshly brewed coffee, a comforting aroma. Second, the vents were clogged with steam and grime. Third, the engine hissed, releasing a cloud of steam. Word, running. Description, refers to the activity of moving quickly on foot. It can also describe a period of time something continues, like a play's run. It is frequently used in phrases about performance, distance, or duration. Phrases of example. First, the running was the hardest part, he thought. Second, running is a gift. Third, he started running, as if he might escape his own life. Word, violence. Description, refers to behavior that causes physical harm or destruction. It describes aggressive actions, often involving force or aggression. It can also refer to strong emotions or conflict, not just physical acts. Phrases of example. First, the worst violence is that which is done to oneself. Second, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Third, Violence has always been our most practical solution. Word step. Description means to take action to achieve something, often involving a gradual process or a series of actions. It implies movement towards a goal, sometimes suggesting a formal or structured approach to problem solving or progress. Phrases of example. First, I can't step back, not now, not after all that's happened. Second, take a step forward, even if you are afraid. Third, it's a small step for a man, a giant leap for mankind. Word, monthly. Description, occurring or done once a month. It describes something that happens regularly on a monthly basis, like a payment, a meeting, or a publication. It indicates a recurring event or cycle that takes place every month. Phrases of example. First, the monthly reports were always a source of stress for the team. Second, he received a monthly stipend for his research. Third, she paid her rent monthly, ensuring a sense of stability. Word, medicine. Description refers to substances used to treat or prevent illness. It can also describe the study and practice of healing. It's used when talking about drugs, treatments, or the field of healthcare to improve health. Phrases of example. First, she took the medicine with a grimace and a silent prayer. Second, the medicine was bitter, but it eased his pain and soothed his fever. Third, he brewed a healing medicine from herbs and flowers. Word, recall. Description means to remember something or to bring a memory or fact back to your mind. It can also mean to request the return of a product or to officially revoke something. It suggests a conscious effort to retrieve information. Phrases of example. First, I can't recall exactly when it started, but I remember it vividly. Second, I recall a time when I thought I could fly. Third, he tried to recall the details of the dream. Word, document. Description, a written record of information, like a letter, report, or official paper. It can also mean to provide written evidence or proof of something. It's a common word used for formal records and written communication. Phrases of example. First, they produced a document showing that I was wrong. Second, I needed to document every detail, every observation. Third, the contract was a legal document, signed and sealed.